In the past couple of years, we've seen tech companies make probably some of the stupidest fucking decisions you've ever seen in your life. Okay, so we have Unity, which wants to charge you per download of a game instead of, charging off the sales of a game. So, and some games are in the Unity engine are free. So you owe the money, and we've seen the conversions. Like in some cases, it would literally bankrupt a gaming studio to release a game. And this opens many companies up to abuse because you can just run macros to just install, uninstall, install, uninstall, install, uninstall. Like if you legitimately just want to sync a company, and I mean, we have Disney releasing the fact that they could absolutely just kill your fucking family member, but because you signed the Disney Plus TOS, you effectively can't fucking sue them. So I was like, okay, so you could have paid, and this is one of those cases, like the guy's only asking for $50,000. So instead of just launching an investigation, instead of, you know, they could just pay him the money for because his wife died to an allergic reaction on Disney grounds. They could have paid him the money, but they choose to fight him off some Looney Tune ass. So they choose to just fight him off a technicality. And it's like, okay, well, obviously they're going to do the perfect situation where they effectively keep him in legality loophole, but they could have not have said why. Like they could have kept it all hush hush, but no, they actively stated that, oh, because you signed the terms of service, you can't sue us. And people are like, okay, what the fuck, Disney? I mean, there's a level of decorum you need to act if you're a company that they're completely just throwing out the window. And in my last video about Ubisoft, you see Ubisoft go and their investors effectively going to war with each other because the company refuses to put out actual good games, actual good products. And they say, oh, this Star Wars Outlaws is going to be the best thing ever, but then it flops. And they're saying the same thing about Assassin's Creed Shadow, and it's also going to flop. But Adobe is an interesting situation, right? Because I don't think I should say this. I've never paid for correct version, wink wink, of Adobe. But I do understand lots of people like Photoshop uses Adobe and a bunch of other things use Adobe. And it was initially free, but now they're doing this thing where they're going to charge you a monthly subscription. And that's just about all I heard. Like, and people are just going to end up pirating Adobe now. But let's get into this. Oh yeah, I did also hear about the lawsuit. So let's get into this.
Adobe is the world's leader in creative software. Their software powers everything from Hollywood blockbusters to your favorite YouTube videos. But beneath the surface, there's a darker story. The company's practices are so controversial that even the US government has sued Adobe. This is why Adobe is one of the most evil companies on the planet. This video is brought to you by my startup.
Most evil company. I mean, there are laws against monopolies in America, but they still kind of happen. Like what's happening with Microsoft buying up all the gaming studios, and have the leader of computers and that type of software. Again, you have Apple I mean, you have companies that are on paper, uh, and that are in the same market and competitors, but it's odd how, like, at least in the case of AAA gaming companies, it's odd how they're not really trying to compete. Like throughout the board, you have games coming out claiming to use consultants, claiming to use DEI, and these are happening to five, six different companies that should be competing with each other, but instead they're all conforming, and you don't like a conspiracy theory doesn't need to exist if the interests converge. So you have multiple companies that have the same interest, right? Bypassing the consumer to get ESG money, to get government grants, then a conspiracy theory is just simply not needed.
Silos, 7.39% yielding bond accounts. First, what does Adobe do? In short, Adobe makes creative software. Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and about a dozen more iconic staple programs all come from Adobe. Despite their current drama, things used to be very different. Many years back, you could actually buy Photoshop along with all of their other products.
Yeah, and again, this is the early 2000s, right? Where you had true digital ownership. You could just buy Adobe on a drive and you just had the software just downloaded that you own and you could do anything with. And it's this way with most softwares, but now everything's trying to. Yeah, it's this way with games, it's this way with movies, it's this way with most digital things. But now, at least online, you have games trying to be you're paying subscriptions for a service. Same thing with like movies, TV shows, right? And it, it obviously the price, like once you pay the initial price, they can just effectively gouge you. They can increase the price, decrease the amount of things they give you. Like they kind of own you, your entertainment at that point. And you see this with like when we had like a Hulu subscription, right? It's like the majority of movies on Hulu we couldn't watch. Well, no, we didn't have the subscription. Never mind. We had the free thing on Hulu, but the majority of the movies we just flat out could not watch unless we had some HBO subscription or another goofy subscription. I mean, and that's the problem, right? It's like maybe initially you have a lot of variety, but then they start price gating your variety behind paywalls, and it's like, okay, so you're the product which was initially free and which at one point had a lot of things on it, like in the case of Hulu, now only has about a fifth unless you actually pay them. And I think this is where most software companies are going to go towards, is the subscription base.
You could pick up a physical disc in store, install it, and you were good to go.
Yeah.
They were expensive at around $700, but once you bought it, you owned that copy of Photoshop. Also, you could upgrade to the newest version for only $200. People loved Adobe's products. They were the best. The company had an amazing reputation, but all of this was about to change. At some point, Adobe's executives realized something. They could make much more money if they overhauled their business model. Have you noticed how almost every digital product or service is now a subscription? This is called software as a service, meaning you pay regularly to use the software instead of buying it outright, and Adobe was one of the first to adopt it. Someone might spend more at once on buying their Creative Suite for $2,000, but this method has a massive downside. Getting a customer to make such a massive purchase is extremely difficult. But a subscription for the same product at a fraction of that price is much easier to digest. People rarely
Yeah, and it started as that. It's like, oh, you pay us if you want to use it. If you want to cut off, that's fine. So you don't have to pay an initial upcharge to get it. But that also comes with its own issues. It's like how much of that do you really own? Like you said, it's service a subscription to the service, right? You don't really own the software. It's like you're paying for the right to use it, you know?
In the distant future and end up paying more than they would have if they just bought the expensive package to start with.
Yeah.
Adobe soon completely stopped selling products that you could own. You could no longer buy Photoshop. Instead, they began licensing products you could lease. Their revenue began to soar as they added hundreds of millions every quarter. But they also gained something else. With a subscription, you're paying Adobe to use their software.
Yeah, you don't
They
own
own
it.
the license, which means they have all the power. They can change anything they want whenever they feel like it, and this is where all the problems started. Adobe soon began sending strange letters to customers using previous versions of their software, stating, "We have recently discontinued certain older versions of Creative Cloud applications, and as a result, under the terms of our agreement, you are no longer licensed to use them. Please be aware that should you continue to use the discontinued versions, you may be at risk of potential claims of infringement by third parties." These were Creative Cloud subscribers who hadn't updated their software in a while. Adobe never explained the full reasoning behind these threats, but naturally, this upset a lot of people. Yet, this isn't why Adobe is being sued by the US government. The reason behind that is much worse.
This one analytics
Oh
settings
my
error cost a
God.
company $1.5 million. I don't want it.
care.
Adobe offers Creative Cloud through an annual or monthly subscription, and they even offer a 7-day trial. But things aren't as they seem. If you sign up for this trial, it says paid monthly, except it's not a monthly subscription. It's a yearly subscription that's billed monthly. Adobe does offer a monthly subscription at $90 a month, subtly encouraging users to take the cheaper monthly option, but this is a trap. If you sign up and continue past 14 days, you're locked in, and Adobe will do everything in their power to keep you there. How? With their dreaded cancellation fee. Hidden in their fine print, if you want to cancel your subscription, you will need to pay 50% of your remaining subscription upfront, which is oftentimes hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, and that's crazy. So, if you're just using it for what, a couple months because maybe your job demands it, or maybe you're contracted out, after those couple of months, it would cost more per value to get rid of it than what you were paying to have it. Then I think even what you've paid initially to have it. Like, that's crazy. And again, the terms of service, like, I've been over this before. Most terms of services are not legally binding. Like, terms of service exists to protect the company from you, the consumer. Like, very few terms of service protect the customer. And what we're seeing with Adobe is that is absolutely the case, right? I don't know what we see with Disney is that is absolutely the case. And again, I don't think people should waive their consumer rights just because the terms of service that are made specifically in a way to where you cannot read through all of them because they use a lot of technical jargon and there's so like 1,000 fucking pages that they probably written out or copied and pasted from another company. Right? It's like these are made in a way to screw you with you, the consumer. So I don't think people's consumer rights can legally be revoked because they signed a terms of service. And again, you get the argument, if you don't like it, don't sign for it. But again, you get certain products, like I think even cars and like TVs are doing this. Like once you you buy the smart TV for like $1,000, but if you do not click that you accept the terms of service, you cannot use that product. And I think this is just going to be something that it inches its way into other facets. I think even vehicles will do this, right? And again, because there's no will to actually learn copyright laws, since most lawmakers are in their like 70s and 80s, and can't be fucked to actually learn anything new. They still think we're in the early 2000s of ownership when it comes to digital products. And again, I think if you just refuse to learn, you just shouldn't have the job, right?
And Adobe isn't very transparent about this. Users who unsubscribe are surprised to see Adobe charge them hundreds of dollars, seemingly out of nowhere. People have been experiencing Adobe's greed for years. Adobe ripped me off for $60 after I signed up for a free trial, proceeded to cancel the trial, and then got charged for the product anyway. Adobe tried to charge me $162 to cancel my Creative Cloud subscription. One user was charged over $300 to cancel their plan, and another even had Adobe attempt to bill them after they paid the cancellation fee. But it gets even worse. Many subscriptions allow you to turn off auto-renew, so your plan will automatically cancel at the end. Adobe doesn't
do that, yeah.
You can't just disable auto-renewing. The only way to cancel is to cancel the entire plan, which causes the massive cancellation fee. And none of this is new either. Adobe has been doing this for many years, except now it's finally catching up with them. The US Federal Trade Commission has taken action against Adobe, but this isn't just any lawsuit. Usually a limited liability company protects the individuals, but the US government is bypassing that given that this is a special case of greed and malice. They are deliberately going after individual executives, two in particular, the president and vice president of Adobe's digital media business. They argued that Adobe fails to adequately disclose to consumers that by signing up for the annual paid monthly subscription plan, they are agreeing to a year-long commitment and a hefty early termination fee that can amount to hundreds of dollars. Adobe clearly discloses the termination fee only when subscribers attempt to cancel, turning the termination fee into a powerful retention tool that generates significant revenues by trapping consumers into subscriptions they no longer want. Adobe naturally disagrees with the decision. They stated that cancellation fees make up less than 1% of their revenue.
And personally, I don't care if it makes up 0.00001% of their revenue. It's just something that shouldn't exist, right? Having to pay a fee to cancel like software is idiotic, and it's something that it shouldn't have gotten to this point. But because there's no real will to get rid of it, it's just companies do this thing where they push something that they know initially people don't, like the consumer doesn't care about, but they'll just push it just ever so slightly, and if it's bashed over the head, they'll pull it back. But again, other companies see this happening and they try to push their version of bullshit. And you've seen this with Unity, you see this with Adobe, you see this with Disney, right? The fact, and with Disney, is the fact that if you sign your TOS, you just cannot sue the company for any reason. And as far as digital ownership, we're very new to it because most ownership is for like obviously physical things, but the whole digital idea is something that's, I'd say we're going into about late elementary, early middle school when it comes to digital ownership, and obviously the gears of legislation turn slower than technology. But I do believe it should turn regardless. We shouldn't be at this point where if you sign up for a subscription and they can effectively impose whatever the fuck they want on it, and you can't even choose not to accept it without them taking the product away from you. It's idiotic.
Though that raises even more questions. Namely, why are they so insistent on using something which has given them so much backlash, which amounts to less than 1% of their revenue? If it's truly less than 1% and it's given them so many issues, why not just remove it? Simple. The process to unsubscribe is horrible. With all kinds of obstacles and the massive cancellation fee, people often stay subscribed even if they don't want to. Long term, this gives Adobe more money and allows them to boast about their low cancellation rates to shareholders.
And most companies, I think demand you use a certain part. Like if you're in like any type of software or editing company, they almost demand you use it. I don't know if there's a cheaper package, but you as the employee needs to use this, right? And even if you're contracted again, you need to use this software. You need to use a legal version of Adobe software. If you don't, well, you can get in trouble with your company and with Adobe. So this is absolutely something that just traps more and more people into it.
That's why the FTC is suing Adobe. Customers couldn't be happier, as it seems like justice is finally being served.
Yeah. Again, they tried to push the envelope, and people are like, no, you cannot do this, right? And this is one of many envelopes that are being pushed, right? Like you have the situation with Microsoft and the FTC about monopolies. Like they know technology, they know people's ability to figure out loopholes goes faster than legislation, but like I said, legislation still needs to account for these things, even if the fossils that are the legislators that are incapable of learning anything new refuse to. Like maybe there should be people that actually knows on like copyright and laws online to fill their positions. Like, but that's just my personal opinion. Son of a bitch. Because again, if I refuse to learn my new job, what the fuck you think would happen to me? I'd get thrown out so fucking fast, and you would too. So why do we have this just odd people who just can work these jobs but refuse to learn anything new, but they still covet the position? That's something beyond my understanding.
Even with this lawsuit, there's actually an entirely different scandal surrounding Adobe at the exact same time. Believe it or not, they're in hot water for something much worse. In the past several years, big tech has jumped headfirst into the AI boom, and Adobe is no different. They've been integrating AI images into their own stock portfolio, but most importantly, training their own generative AI, Firefly, one very similar to Midjourney or DALL-E, but also integrates into Photoshop and other programs. The only issue is that AIs need data for machine learning, lots of it. So Adobe weaseled in hidden terms into the Creative Cloud with horrible implications. Adobe had very subtly changed their terms that granted them full access to users' local content. And most bafflingly of all, they included that they had a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free, sub-licensable license to use, reproduce, publicly display, and much more. Adobe based.
And that is wild. Because say you're working for a company and you have things under NDA, the fact that they effectively just own it now because you're using their software is crazy. And they can train their AI off of it is crazy, right? That's fucking huge. And this is what I mean when I say terms of service just exist primarily to fuck the consumer and protect the company. It's like, ugh. And again, they can change their terms of service however way they want, however many times they want, and if you don't like it, well, pay us $400-500 fucking dollars and you can get out of it. Like, that's fucking wild.
Basically decided that taking your money wasn't good enough. They wanted to own your assets.
Yeah, own the things
everything.
that you make using their software that at one point you owned anyway, but then because they tinkered with a couple of terms of service things, nope, they own it now.
Adobe could view your local files and do what they wished, but users caught on very quickly.
Our access to your content. We may access, view, or listen to your content through both automated and manual methods. And then down here it says our automated systems may analyze your content in Creative Cloud customer fonts which are defined over there, using techniques such as machine learning in order to improve our services and software and the user experience.
Not only was this unethical training for their AI, but it also came with all kinds of implications. This is especially concerning for users and companies who use NDAs to protect their work, like those working on films or commercial space. Adobe was trying to override everything, and the backlash was huge. A worldwide boycott of Adobe began, with many major news outlets weighing in on the story. Some artists began uploading nightshade art to Creative Cloud, a way of intentionally misleading and poisoning machine learning. Adobe insisted that Firefly was ethically trained, but the evidence was clear. And following the enormous backlash, Adobe quickly changed their terms. They outlined in their new terms, we don't scan or review content that is stored locally on your device. We also don't train generative AI models on your or your customer's content unless you've submitted the content to the Adobe stock marketplace. A good change, but they've only done so because they were caught doing just that. But they're not.
Yeah, this is what I mean. They were bonked down. They're like, oh, well, I guess we won't do this. But if they weren't bonked down, this would have just been something that they slipped under the radar. And if people didn't look at this, again, the terms of service that is specifically meant to fuck you over and to protect the company, this is, would it have been knocked down? I doubt it would.
Not out of the clear just yet. You might have caught the last part of that statement about the Adobe stock marketplace. This was once a prestigious resource for artists and professionals, but it is now flooded with AI with its own consequences. Brian Kessinger, a lead artist at Disney, found AI copies of his work in the marketplace with his name falsely attached to it. While this has increased the breadth of Adobe stock, or catalog of stock photos, it's hard to say that this is a good thing. Browsing it today shows an absurd amount of low-quality AI artwork, many of which have incorrect spelling or weird, unnatural details.
Now, if it wasn't bad enough that what's supposed to be a database full of real professional photographs has been completely diluted with unusable garbage, if I did want to license any of these photos, it would cost me $80. $80 for a photo someone generated by typing police car.
Adobe is hurting their own reputation as well as their own catalog. All of this has placed Adobe in a very bad light, all of which is their own fault. They're greedy, malicious, and their business model is predatory. The people who hate them the most right now are their own customers. All of this exposes a bigger problem that creatives are seriously considering. For the past decade, the creative industry has been ruled by Adobe. They got so successful because they made great products. But over time, they slowly also became a monopoly. In a healthy market with a lot of competition, if a company provides bad services, customers can simply switch to a competitor. So the whole market faces pressure to provide the best service.
Like, maybe there is a competitor to Adobe, but I mean, they're probably lesser known, few and far in between, and offer less than the Adobe. So it's like you really have nowhere else to turn.
Service or a unique experience. But for many years now, Adobe has ruled their industry, and as time has gone on, they've made things worse for the consumer. But things might be changing. For years, people have been advocating others to switch from Adobe, looking for alternatives to this evil monolith. Their products have become notably unstable, their service has become more predatory, and now, with the changes to their terms brought to light, everyone has the best reason to leave Adobe behind. We're finally starting to see progress in the market. DaVinci Resolve.
That, or you can sail the high seas. But again, like I said, if you're working for a company that tells you, no, you must use Adobe, because, I don't know, maybe Adobe does business to business with other companies like Hollywood, which is why they're a monopoly, probably why they're a monopoly and can afford to do these predatory things. I mean, you're kind of screwed. Like, again, I can kind of think of a couple programs, but not much. Like, there was one I used at college, I can't even remember his fucking name, But there's not really many that has, you know, the editing abilities that Adobe does. And obviously, Adobe using AI is nothing new. Like many software companies are delving into machine learning and into AI because it's the new tech craze, it's the new invention. It's this idea of infinite growth and infinite just money, pretty much. Like they just have this infinite loot box of generative tools, right? And any software company would jump at the ability to have this, and Adobe is no different.
Adobe has become more and more popular as a video editor, especially for blockbuster films, and as has Affinity as a Photoshop alternative. The market seems to be slowly but surely correcting
Wait,
itself.
was that Affinity? I think that was the one I was thinking about. Affinity.
Especially for blockbuster films, and as has Affinity as a Photoshop
Yeah, it was Affinity that I used. No, I didn't use the paid version, but yeah.
alternative. The market seems to be slowly but surely correcting itself, and hopefully this forces Adobe to rethink their ethics, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, not just Adobe, like many other companies, because Adobe is just one in a sea of other companies that are like, wow, we could actually really just fuck with our consumers, right? And it's one thing to put out a product that the consumer wants because that's a healthy marketplace. You know, I don't have a problem with wanting to make money as a company, but I do have a problem if the consumer suffers, like in that need or when you want to make money off of them. Like, that's what I have a problem with.
If you're interested in deeper dives, interviews with insiders, and exclusive tech analysis, you can sign up to our free weekly newsletter. Link is below. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, very insightful video. I like it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. Again, this is just, one of probably many other tech companies that are understanding that they can just fuck with their consumers, and there's really very little there's very little many of the consumers will do about it, but for those few that look at it and it's like, well, I don't want to be part of this. Like, in the case of Adobe, they fuck with you even more with making it as difficult and as hard as possible to tune out of it. And I think Adobe is one of those companies where it is a moral good to pirate it, right? And well, what about updates? Well, I mean, you know, the site I'm thinking of will absolutely be updating it. But I'm not saying you should pirate anything. I'm not saying you should be a very, very bad person. But, you know, when push comes to shove, and when situations like these happen, it's like you really just leave the consumer no other choice. But hey, that's all I gotta say about this. Peace.